David pinched the bridge of his nose, feeling the tension rise. "Rebecca, I would have given you the money if you'd just asked. Why did you use Venmo for this?" Rebecca sighed, her frustration evident even through the phone. "Because I needed it quickly. You're always busy or unreachable, David. I can't keep chasing you down for every little thing. This is important to Tyler, and to me." He glanced at the stack of contracts on his desk, suddenly seeming heavier than before. "I'm not trying to make things difficult, Rebecca. I just want to be included." There was a long pause. Then her tone softened, just a bit. "Look, I'm sorry, but I did what I had to. The deposit's due today, and I can't risk losing the place. Please, just handle the payment." David nodded, even though she couldn't see him. "All right, I'll send it now." He hung up, feeling a mix of anger, guilt, and confusion, all swirling together in his chest. As he logged into his account to transfer the money, a thought nagged at him. Rebecca had never been this cold before. Had he really let things slip so far? He pushed the feeling aside and sent the payment. Moments later, he stood by his office window, looking out over the city skyline he'd helped build. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, all he felt was a growing sense of unease. You deserve consideration? You act like being a bank for the family gives you the right to everything else. You were never around, Dad. You missed the moments that mattered. David felt his jaw clench as he tried to keep his composure. "Tyler, I know I've made mistakes, but this is my family too. I care about you. I just want to be part of this milestone. Is that too much to ask?" There was a heavy silence on the line. Finally, Tyler sighed with a weariness that pierced David's heart. "Look, it's done. The party's happening without you. Don't come. Don't make this harder than it has to be." David opened his mouth to protest, but the words wouldn't come. For a moment, he stood there, phone pressed to his ear, struggling to find something, anything, that could bridge the widening chasm between them. "Please, Tyler, just talk to me. Tell me what I can do." Tyler's answer was quiet, cold. "Send the money, Dad. That's all you ever needed to do." The line clicked dead. David lowered the phone slowly, hands trembling. The walls of his office seemed to close in around him, the weight of years of sacrifice and missed moments crashing down. For the first time, he realized that all his hard work hadn't just built skyscrapers in Phoenix. It had also built insurmountable walls inside his own home. David let out a deep, shaky breath, filled with regret, uncertainty, and a desperate hope that it wasn't too late to repair what had been broken. There's a strategy behind this, a coordinated effort. I refuse to believe they just woke up one day and decided to shut me out. Rebecca's too sharp for that. She's been working me over with her editor for months at least. I need proof, Ray. Facts. Dates. I want to understand how this happened under my nose. Ray's eyes narrowed, his years of experience kicking in. You want surveillance, background checks, the works? David nodded, his face set with determination. I want every detail, emails, texts, meetings, any hint as to what Rebecca's been plotting, who helped her, and how far this goes. If Tyler's involved, I need to know the truth, no matter how much it hurts. Ray leaned forward, his voice low and steady. You know this won't be pretty, David. The answers you get might make things worse. Are you sure you want to go down this road? David took a deep breath, glancing again at the Venmo request and the wedding photo. His whole world had shifted, but his resolve only hardened. I owe it to myself, and maybe even to Tyler, to to get the facts. I need to know where I really stand. Ray gave a short nod and raised his glass. All right, I'll get my team on it. We'll start with Brad Hoffman. If there's dirt to be found, we'll find it. David managed a faint smile for the first time that day. Thanks, Ray. More than ever, I need an old friend, one who's always got my back. Ray chuckled. You'd do the same for me, Crane. Let's see what your lovely wife and her poet are hiding. Outside Ray's window, the lights of Phoenix sparkled, bright and oblivious to the drama unfolding above. David sat in silence, the gentle burn of bourbon a small comfort, as his friend began assembling the tools that could tear his family's secrets into the open. Ray nodded grimly. He's the kind of man who weaves himself into places of vulnerability, helps the spouse feel seen and understood, all while nudging everyone else out of the picture. It's classic. He undermined you with Rebecca, just like he did with his ex-wife's partner. And Tyler, well, he was an easy target, a young man needing attention that Brad was eager to give. David's hands curled into fists. The betrayal burned even brighter now, knowing it wasn't accidental but orchestrated by someone with a pattern, a method. So, Rebecca wasn't just swept off her feet. She was guided, manipulated. And Tyler, he doesn't even see it happening. Ray gave him a sympathetic look. That's usually how it works, especially when there's a rift already there. You're not blameless, David. You were gone a lot. But Brad used it, exploited the cracks until the whole thing broke apart. If you want leverage in the divorce, this pattern could help. Courts look at parental alienation, especially when it's a recurring thing. We can get statements, even reach out to Brad's ex if you want. The idea of airing all this in court filled David with equal parts dread and resolve. If that's what it takes to show the truth, to Tyler, to everyone, then that's what I have to do. Ray closed his laptop and leaned back, stretching. You have options, David. It's not over yet, not by a long shot. But you'll need to decide. Fight back hard, or try to reconcile with damage already done. David stared out the window once more, his silhouette outlined by the city lights. He'd spent his life solving problems with determination and hard work. Now, for the first time, he faced a challenge that couldn't be fixed with blueprints or steel beams. His family's trust and love would be far harder to rebuild. But beneath all the pain, there was a spark, a stubborn determination that had built his life from nothing. David Crane would not just pay the requested price and disappear quietly. Not now, not ever. Brad followed a script, preying on vulnerabilities until he'd fully supplanted the original husband's role. Ray's dossier was thorough. Financial records showed Brad stretching his resources with alimony and child support, and he always left relationships when the money dried up or his influence waned. There were old emails between Brad and Rebecca that hinted at strategies for winning Tyler over, documenting every time David missed a family event as evidence that he had checked out emotionally. Armed with this information, David sat back in his chair, an icy calm washing over him. He had built an empire by outthinking rivals, reading chess moves that others didn't even see. Now, more than ever, that skill would be his shield and his sword. At 2 p.m. sharp, Rebecca entered the Desert Palms restaurant alone, just as instructed. She was pale and tense, clutching her purse with white knuckles. Brad was nowhere in sight, but David knew he was likely waiting in the car or somewhere nearby, texting for updates. David stood as she approached the table, gesturing for her to sit. "Rebecca," he said, using the calm, measured tone he reserved for hostile board meetings. "Thank you for coming." She said nothing, just frowned and glanced at the neat folder on the table between them. "You can drop the performance, David. What do you want? David slid the folder across to her. I want you to understand the stakes. Inside is proof of Brad's pattern, how he's manipulated families before, how he's orchestrated this from the start. Bank records, restraining orders, testimony from his ex-wife, and how he alienated her children. Rebecca's eyes widened as she scanned the first page, her hand trembling. You followed me? I didn't have to, David replied, his voice even. Brad's made a habit of this. You're not his first, Rebecca, but you could be the last, with your eyes finally opened. She looked up at him, anger and fear battling for control in her expression. Why are you doing this? Because you and Tyler are still my family, David said quietly, and you deserve to see the truth before it's too late. Her defenses wavered as she studied the evidence before her. For a moment, the bitterness that had fueled her resolve faltered, replaced by confusion and dawning fear. I needed someone who was there, David. Someone who noticed me. Her voice was barely more than a whisper. David leaned in, not unkindly. You deserve to be noticed, Rebecca. I failed you in ways I regret every single day. He gestured to the papers between them. But Brad, he doesn't love you. Not in the way you think. To him, you're another step, another trophy, until you aren't convenient anymore. This is about so much more than our mistakes. Rebecca's hand trembled as she finally picked up the phone number, running her thumb over the digits. She looked so lost, so much like the young woman who'd challenged him in a campus coffee shop decades ago, but without her old certainty. I thought I was building a future, she said, blinking hard. I thought Tyler and I would finally have someone who cared. David softened, letting a flicker of genuine vulnerability show. You and Tyler always had me. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not always present, but you were never just an obligation. You were my whole reason for the fight. I wanted to give you safety. Instead, I pushed you to someone who feeds off broken people. Silence settled between them, heavy with old love and fresh wounds. Rebecca's shoulders sagged as she finally let the reality settle in. What do I do, David? She asked, tears threatening to fall. David reached across the table and gently covered her hand with his own, his voice steady with resolve. You call Janet. You see for yourself. Protect our son, Rebecca. Don't let Brad finish what he started. David fixed her with a look as unyielding as the steel beams he'd spent his life raising into the phoenix sky. I'm going to protect what's left of my life, Rebecca. I won't let you or anyone else turn me into a bystander in my own story. And as for Brad, he'll never get to hurt another family the way he nearly hurt ours. Rebecca pressed her trembling hand to her lips, tears finally escaping. David, please. He shook his head. You'll have to live with your choices, just as I'll live with mine. I hope, for Tyler's sake, you make better ones from now on. Without another word, David strode from the restaurant, the weight of betrayal behind him, and the uncertain future ahead. He refused to let bitterness be the legacy he left for his son. His phone buzzed, a new message from Ray. The evidence against Brad Hoffman was already being sent to the authorities and Brad's publisher at the Phoenix Herald. David allowed himself a small, tired smile. Whatever tomorrow would bring, it would not be silence or surrender. For the first time in months, he walked tall, his heart heavy but unbroken, determined to rebuild from the wreckage, with dignity, honesty, and the unyielding strength that had built an empire, and perhaps, with time, could restore a father's bond. David spoke with a calm authority. Marcus, it's David Crane. I wanted to give you a heads up about Brad Hoffman. he's involved in some activities that may reflect badly on your paper. Gambling debts, questionable relationships with sources, and there's a restraining order in his history that your HR should be aware of. I'd advise an immediate review of his conduct before things get public. Marcus's sharp intake of breath told David he'd made an impact. We'll take this very seriously, David. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. We have a zero-tolerance policy for impropriety here at the Herald. Glad to hear it, Marcus. I expect you'll want to handle things internally before they come out another way, David said, knowing enough to let the threat linger in the unspoken. By 9:15 a.m., the dominoes began to fall. Frank's men made a scheduled visit to the Phoenix Herald, requesting Brad's presence at the front desk for an urgent delivery. The conversation that followed, witnessed by co-workers and superiors, left no doubt about Brad's reputation or his financial desperation. Half an hour later, Marcus requested that Brad accompany him to a private conference room. Ray's file, passed discreetly through company channels, awaited them. The accusations were not just personal, but professional. Conflicts of interest, financial improprieties, and behavioral red flags all spelled disaster for any hopes Brad had of sheltering under the protection of the paper. By lunchtime, Brad's position at the Herald was under review, and his creditors were circling. Word traveled fast. Whispers of his financial ruin and predatory patterns traveled even faster. Meanwhile, Rebecca received her own copy of the dossier, accompanied by a formal letter from David's attorney detailing the evidence and making it clear that any claim she might entertain for financial compensation would be legally and ethically contested based on Brad's documented pattern of manipulation. David made sure Ray included Janet Morrison's testimony and the supporting paperwork from previous cases. As the day drew on, David watched from his office window, the Phoenix skyline glowing in the clear sunlight. The city was as unforgiving as he was. He felt no triumph, only a heavy satisfaction, a balance restored, a lesson delivered. The day Brad Hoffman chose David Crane's family as his next target was the day he lost the game. David's phone buzzed with a single message from Ray. It's done. David nodded to himself. He knew he'd reclaimed control, not just for revenge, but for respect, his own, and perhaps one day, his son's. Tyler's face crumpled with the dawning realization that things had changed far more drastically than he thought. The silence stretched between them, heavy and final. Dad, wait, can we talk about this? Tyler's voice trembled, uncertainty replacing the entitlement he'd shown before. David paused at the doorway, but didn't look back. When you're ready to talk like an adult, and ready to own your choices and your mistakes, you know where to find me. Until then, you live with what you've built. He closed the door gently, the sound echoing in the quiet corridor. For a long moment, David stood outside, steadying himself against the storm of regret and relief swirling within. He could finally see the line between sacrifice and self-betrayal, and he knew he'd let that line blur for too long. Driving away from Tyler's apartment, David felt the sharp ache of love and loss clawing at his chest. But underneath, there was a growing certainty. He'd done all he could, given his son every chance. Now, the next lesson was Tyler's to learn. As David headed back toward Central Phoenix, his phone rang. Ray's name lit up the screen, and David answered, his voice steadier than he felt. It's all falling apart for Brad, Ray said, his tone laced with satisfaction. The paper's investigating, the police are interested, and his creditors are circling. You sure you're ready for the fallout? I've been ready for this my whole life. David replied quietly. Let's see who comes through the fire and who turns to ash. With one last look in the rearview mirror, David pressed forward. The past was closed to him, its doors locked by betrayal and hard-won truth. But the future, however lonely, belonged to a man who would never again mistake kindness for weakness. David's words were steady, tinged with just enough coldness to keep his guard up. You believed what you wanted to believe, Rebecca. Brad told you what you needed to hear, just like he's done to every woman before you. On the other end, Rebecca was silent for a moment, the truth hitting with a weight she could no longer ignore. Her voice, when it returned, was raw with disbelief and regret. Tyler, he's so hurt. He feels lost. What do I tell him? David let out a slow breath, willing himself to stay strong. You tell him the truth. About Brad, about the choices you made, about how none of this happened in a vacuum. It's about consequences. For me, for you, for him. He heard the tremor in her next words. Will you talk to him, David? I don't know if he'll listen to me now. I'll talk to him, David said, quietly resolute, when he's ready to listen. But this time, Rebecca, I won't chase after him, or after you. We all have to live with what we've done. That's how we grow up. The line fell silent. Then Rebecca whispered, almost pleading, I'm sorry. For everything. David closed his eyes, feeling the buried ache and the faintest hint of relief. So am I, he said softly. But sorry doesn't erase the damage. We can only move forward. That's all I'm doing now. He ended the call, staring out at the sprawling city that had come to signify both ambition and loss. The reckoning was complete, the game over. Now it was time for everyone to account for what was left, and to decide what, if anything, could be rebuilt. David took a measured breath, the weight of all that had happened settling in his chest. No, Tyler, I'm not cutting you off forever. But actions have consequences. Trust needs to be rebuilt, and that takes time. Sometimes it takes a lifetime. If you want a relationship with me, you have to do the work. It doesn't come with a check or a demand. It comes with honesty, respect, and the willingness to make amends. Tyler's voice was small, uncertain. I don't know where to start. You start by taking responsibility for your choices. You start by understanding what trust really means. And you start by letting go of people who only care about you when it's convenient for them. David's words were firm, but this time they carried a thread of hope. I'm here, Tyler. I've always been here. When you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll listen. There was another pause, then a quiet, choked, Okay, Dad, I want to try. I really do. David nodded to himself, feeling the first crack of light after a long, dark storm. Then take your time, son. We'll see where it goes. But remember, trust is everything. He ended the call, a tentative peace settling over him. David knew the coming days would be difficult, and the road to reconciliation would be uncertain and long. But for the first time, the future didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a chance, a hard-won, honest chance to build something new. And that, David realized, was worth every sacrifice. Tyler swallowed hard, his voice almost a whisper. I paid off some credit cards, and the rest, I guess I just lived. Rent, groceries, a used car. I thought it would last longer. I didn't expect everything to be this expensive. He met his father's gaze, guilt and shame written plainly across his face. David studied his son, taking in the reality before him. You made choices, Tyler. Grown-up choices. Grown-up choices come with real consequences. I structured that agreement to help you learn something I couldn't teach you with words or gifts." He paused, letting the silence impress the lesson. Tyler's shoulders slumped. "I know. I was wrong about a lot of things, Dad," he admitted. "About Brad, about you, about what it really means to have someone in your corner. Is there any way you could help me out? Just enough to get back on my feet?" David leaned forward, his expression stern but not unkind. "Help is always possible, Tyler, but real help doesn't come from handouts. It's earned through responsibility, through honesty, and through true effort. If you want my support now, it comes with expectations. You show me you're ready to honor your commitments, to yourself and to your family." Tyler nodded, struggling not to lose composure. "I am ready, Dad. I'll do whatever it takes. I want to start making things right." David considered him for a moment longer, seeing both the remorse and the hope in his son's eyes. "All right, Tyler. We'll draw up a new agreement. One based on realistic terms, but with clear expectations. You'll work, you'll save, and you'll keep me updated on your progress. And in return, I'll offer guidance, and maybe, someday, trust again." Tyler's relief was palpable, his gratitude honest. "Thank you, Dad. I mean it this time. I won't let you down." The meeting ended not with a handshake, but with a quiet, hesitant sense of rebuilding. As Tyler left his office, David felt a cautious optimism blooming for the first time in years. Brick by brick, mistake by honest effort, a new foundation was being laid, one that might finally stand the test of time. As the door clicked shut behind Tyler, David let out a slow, steady breath. The sound echoed softly in the vastness of his office, a reminder of all he had won and all he had lost. He felt the ache of a father's love for his son, mingled with the disappointment of a teacher watching a lesson only half learned. He returned to the window, watching a new building rise from the dust of a vacant lot, and thought of the years it had taken to learn what real foundations were made of. Accountability, not forgiveness without growth. Effort, not expectation. Truth, not empty apologies. There would be other projects, new beginnings, and perhaps even a future reconciliation, if Tyler could walk the road from regret to genuine self-awareness. For now, David vowed to hold the line, letting natural consequences take root where, for so many years, he'd tried to shield his family from the world's harsh lessons. He turned back to his desk, focus sharpening as a new set of blueprints awaited his attention. Brick by brick, decision by decision, David Crane knew he would keep building, for himself, for his company, and perhaps one day, for a family rebuilt on stronger, truer ground. And as he reviewed the plans for his next project, David found, not bitterness, but resolve, a quiet conviction that strength and compassion could coexist, but only when boundaries were respected and trust was truly earned. Next time. David turned away from the window, ready to answer Ray's message and focus on the horizons yet to be claimed. The city below thrummed with possibilities, and Crane Construction's future was limited only by his ambition and discipline. He had learned, at great cost, that not every loss is a setback. Sometimes, it is simply a clearing for something stronger to be built in its place. As David prepared for his next endeavor, he carried the hard-won lessons of betrayal, forgiveness, and resilience with him. Foundation by foundation, stone by stone, he would continue forward, defined not by the family who left, but by the empire he refused to let crumble. And for a man like David Crane, that was not just enough. It was everything.